Well, hello. Today I'd like to do a book review on Oscar Rossiter's Tetrasomy 2. We'll put it here. How about that? So, this is a book that's about, well, what is it about? This could get interesting. So, you could read it. Got my notes here. And I'm in a new notebook, by the way. So, you could read it as an awkward romance with some science fiction elements. You could read it as an awkward romance. The book came out in with a tragic ending, I should add that, if we go the awkward romance route. It came out in 1974, and you can tell that it was written by a doctor, an actual real doctor. His name was not Oscar Rossiter. I didn't write down what his real name was, but don't care. And as near as I can tell, this is the only novel that he ever wrote. So it follows the misadventures of a Dr. Boyd. Most of the people are generally referred to by Mr. or Mrs. or Doctor. We do learn the first names of two of the characters, including him. I want to say it's David, but clearly it didn't stick in my memory. But, and of course, 1974, maybe it was a more formal time. I was born a year after that, so I don't know. But anyway, it follows the misadventures of Dr. Boyd, who's a first-year resident at a state psychiatric hospital. And at first, his main interest is, of course, in the lovely Nurse Holloway. And but his problem is he is socially awkward. So every encounter with her ends up in disaster of some kind. He comes up with, which we all do this, comes up with these smooth lines in his brain, and then the reality is, okay, I should have just stayed home. But anyway, I first heard of this book from pen reviewer Chris Rapp 52. He had read it, and I can't remember if he recommended it or not, but anyway, he gave the name, because what struck him and struck me is that Dr. Boyd is a fountain pen collector. He likes vintage fountain pens. So do I. And he actually collects ones that have engraved names. So I thought that was kind of an interesting hobby for 1974 because, fountain pens hadn't disappeared then, but they were certainly still a thing. I've got several lovely 1970s fountain pens that show that the art was not gone then. So it was kind of fun, just as you read the book, every so often they would mention a fountain pen of some brand. A vintage one, of course. A vintage Parker Dual-Fold made its appearance. Well, sitting on my desk here, I have a vintage Parker Dual-Fold from probably the 1920s that I plan to fix and film a video of me fixing it. The other interesting thing about this character... try that again, because I'm not reading my writing very well here. The other interesting character in this book, because there's a lot of characters, is Mr. Peckham. He's a patient at this psychiatric hospital. And they describe him as a human vegetable. In fact, Nurse Holloway calls him a mushroom. Yeah. He had become unresponsive many, many decades ago. The book opens with Dr. Boyd talking to a psychiatrist, apparently as a patient. So that's seems like a reveal of the ending, but Oscar Rossiter was smarter than that, and there is so much more to the ending than this. So yeah, if you go with the one ending, it's kind of tragic that he ends up in a psychiatric hospital, but there is quite a bit more going on here. So, the real question I had, and maybe I'm dumb because most of the book descriptions don't describe it this way, but is he delusional? Or is everything he thinks happening real? So these characters get the most development. But I will say the other characters definitely have some personality as well. We meet a business guy. We meet several other residents. We meet head doctors. We meet doctors at other hospitals. Nurses that run the records room. We meet all kinds of people. So I will say he gives them all personality. Like the nurse on his first day as a resident who won't let him fill out the carbon paper forms, because that was the thing back then, with a fountain pen because it won't press through. He's like, yes, it will, but she wants him to use the ballpoint. He's like, ew, nasty. Anyway, Dr. Boyd begins to receive messages from Mr. Peckham. They're mostly 2 or 3 word messages, usually a word and a number. At first they turn out to be stock recommendations, and later on they turn out to be other things that he's supposed to investigate, which the author gets kind of careless about translating what the heck some of them are. So, but this makes him very curious about Mr. Peckham, and he starts to research his case, and he finds out that people are actually hiding things. Like, he actually has people threaten him over his care of Mr. Peckham. Now, possibly because Mr. Peckham had wealthy parents who died in a fire, and these people are receiving insurance money or something like that, or access to the fortune. I don't know. I wasn't totally clear why they were so angry about him possibly helping this guy, but anyway, he begins to suspect that Mr. Peckham also controlled some people, mental control, or gave suggestions to other people about things to do. Like, he thinks that his developing romance with Nurse Holloway, despite his social awkwardness, is all thanks to the influence of Mr. Peckham. Eventually in the book, and he does a lot of investigating Mr. Peckham's past. He ends up with a romance with Nurse Holloway and all that stuff. But eventually he starts to discover himself developing talents, especially when he's under the influence of alcohol. So under the influence of alcohol at a party, he's following multiple conversations and filling in details of really obscure knowledge that's in these conversations, as an example. He gets some people so upset over this obscure knowledge that they just want to wail on him. One guy throws a drink in his face and wants to, which apparently means let's go outside and duke it out, which, okay, I've never had anybody say, oh, let's settle this outside. I don't know, maybe it's a thing in California, which is where the book takes place. But yeah, they're just minor particulars of just obscure interest, and you're like, okay, you don't get upset about that. Like, people say, I think you got that dual fold model wrong because the cap is all wrong to be this model of dual folding. Okay. I mean, sometimes I disagree, sometimes I agree on further research, but I don't get that emotional about it. But whatever, different strokes for different folks. But I will say that the book did start to lose me with that. And then he started reading minds. He started to decide he can control people. He started seeing all the details of everything, and to protect his memory from filling up with all the details of everything, he started stuffing cotton in his ears and putting paper inside of his glasses so he couldn't see anything. I don't know. It's like I felt like I'd fallen asleep for a few pages. I'm like, what? Where'd this come from? And Nurse Holloway is, she thinks he's nuts at that point, but at the same time she's playing along with it, and I just, the ending kind of lost me there. Now, I will say that the book did come to a satisfying, if inconclusive, conclusion. Was he just plain nuts? I know I shouldn't say that, but I just did. Was he nuts, or is it the science fiction ending that he proposes the reality? And I'm going to try not to do spoilers with that ending, but there is a very different and kind of frightening explanation for Mr. Peckham. So, either way, I thought it made sense. I felt like the book did not come down firmly on either possible interpretation of the ending. All the descriptions of the book do. This book, okay, so since this is on the back of the book, I feel like I'm not doing a spoiler. Take care to avoid any particular face. I directed my thoughts to them. Prepare for a shock. This is all in italics. What you will hear will be mind-stretching. Remember, the true scientist can abandon established ideas. And then the rest of this is in regular text. Imagine, I began again, a person possessing a colossal intelligence, many orders of magnitude greater than what we call genius. Imagine also that the experience of mankind, as the puzzles of nature and the universe have been unraveled, others more complex and fascinating have also been revealed, is also true for this person, but on a scale infinitely grander, so that available to him is an endlessly intricate and absorbing pastime that is incomprehensible to those about him. What sort of life would he choose? Just as many of our geniuses are considered eccentric in their preoccupation, he would be considered hopelessly insane, and he would welcome that. So, pretty much gives it away. And if it doesn't, like I said, I don't want to do spoilers in these book reviews. One thing I did wonder that was sort of unclear is what happened to Nurse Wagner after all of this, but with what happens with the main character, I guess that's not as big of an interest to him. So the characters in this book were believable, for the most part. I thought they had some dimension. There was a lot of meandering in the plot, and had a hard time believing the romance, but I also think that may have been on purpose, because the main character couldn't believe it was happening either, because here's this nurse that looks like a movie star, and she's like after him. So, and I just kind of wondered, why did it all come on at once? How did he end up at this particular hospital as a resident? And I kind of wish the author had been a little clearer about the ending, because I'm not even clear that the author intended the ending to be ambiguous. I just took it that way, which I know we all bring our own subjective interpretations to a book, but yeah. So it just a lot of things toward the end seem to all suddenly happen, and you're just like, what? Oh, it's over. Well, shoot. That's kind of where I was with this book. So, I'm not sad that I read it, but to be honest, maybe after I retire, I'll read it again, but it's not one I'll be in any hurry to reread, so. How's that for a endorsement of a book? So, anyway, Tetrasomy 2, which is a reference to the fact that the Mr. Peckham has 2 extra chromosomes, and it turns out the author, the Dr. Boyd, has mixed extra chromosomes. I was a little unclear on that, but anyway, yeah, Tetrasomy 2, Oscar Rossiter, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to thank you for watching. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.